Hi, and welcome everybody to QA Technology Talks. This is Series 2. Today I'm here with Joey Howe. He's our HP UFT expert and a senior solution architect with ResultsPositive. Today we're going to actually be talking about HP UFT and the basics around application programming interfaces, or APIs. Our agenda today, quick introduction. I'm going to provide a UFT overview. I want to speak a little bit about the evolution of the product from Quick Test Professional into today's version known as UFT, or Unified Functional Test. We'll do a quick expert analysis as well. Joey's going to provide some background and some context around UFT and how it can be used for API testing, and then we'll get into a live demo. So a little background on ResultsPositive. We were founded in 2004. We are a Platinum HP partner focused on improving business execution. The firm pioneered the Rapid Start implementation approach around several of the quality management products, including HP Quality Center, ALM, Performance Center, UFT, and more recently, Agile Manager. As part of the Rapid Start programs, we offer upgrade services, greenfield implementation services. We also offer consulting and coaching, as well as instructor-led training. As part of the Rapid Start program, we've also recently introduced RP SaaS. RP SaaS is a hosting program, a managed services program, where we can actually take the managed services and the hosting off your shoulders for all of the different HP products available. Some of our notable customers you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. We've done business with over 200 different customers, a lot of major brand names as you can see. We are also an HP Platinum partner. We are ASMPS support provider, meaning that we can handle all of your support tickets across your different technologies that you're using. And as you can see, we've been awarded Partner of the Year multiple years in a row. Speaker biography. So today, I'm in the lower right-hand corner here. My name is Matt Anger. I'm hosting today's technology talk. I have about 15 years of industry IT experience, variety of sectors I've worked across, the DoD, in particular the Navy, the Army, the Defense Logistics Agency. I've also had a lot of experience in the private sector as well. I'm an expert in ALM, Application Lifecycle Management. Some of my hobbies, I enjoy boating. I live in South Florida. I do a lot of deep sea fishing. In fact, I was actually featured in the Miami Herald last year. I caught a blue marlin, 200-pound blue marlin. I was featured in that. I enjoy running, biking, and anything pretty much outdoors. We also have Joey Howe on the call today. He's also a senior solution architect with ResultsPositive. He has over 20 years of technology experience across many different sectors. He's also an HP Expert 1 certified professional. Very, very deep experience in UFT, Application Lifecycle Management, Performance Center, and a multitude of other ADM tools. He's a quality assurance expert. He enjoys traveling and exploring the world. So why test automation? So as we know, test automation is pretty much, the sweet spot for regression testing. So, being able to automate the execution of your regression test suite enables organizations to sort of kind of deliver faster and to reduce the level of manual effort involved in testing new functionality or testing existing functionality that may have been inadvertently impacted by changes coming through the delivery pipeline. There's different layers to testing automation, as we know. Starting from the top left, you can see we have the business process layer. In the middle, we have the graphical or the GUI interface layer for user acceptance testing. And then in the bottom left, we have the headless layer for web services, APIs, components, unit integration. So the crux of today's call is really to focus our attention around the headless layer and how HP UFT helps organizations to sort of shift left and to focus more of their attention on testing the APIs or the web services that are stubbed out that speak to all these third-party or even internal applications. In fact, if you think about it, many of the programs or many of the software today is designed in open architecture. So we have platforms available today that integrate and speak to a variety of different external systems. So no one piece of software sort of sits in isolation unless it's, a highly protected, regulated software where everything is kind of closed off. Oftentimes you see that, if you look at SaaS applications available, you notice that oftentimes the websites will advertise fully documented API, connect in with our product. And, the point of doing that, obviously, is they want to proliferate their brand in the marketplace. But with that comes a high level of complexity and challenges that organizations need to be able to test. So whether you're, communicating through SOAP, whether you're communicating through RESTful APIs, or simply, perhaps you're communicating through EDI. Maybe you have an EDI subsystem internally like Gentran that's integrated with your ERP system, SAP, and you're trading data with your supplier community. Maybe you're trading 830 planning schedules, or perhaps you're trading EDI 852 vendor managed inventory transactions. Well, today we're going to kind of show you how you can use HP's UFT product to kind of facilitate that testing and to move data between. So you're not, if you think about the business process layer or the graphical user interface layer of testing, certainly you can test interfaces indirectly by logging into another system and verifying via the graphical user interface that certain data elements are appearing in both the source and destination systems, right? I've done that before. Looking at data conversion testing or looking at interface testing, perhaps you start a transaction in your ERP system and you say, okay, I'm going to follow that transaction all the way through to an external system. That's a web-based system that's external, knowing that, under the hood, there are mechanisms in place that are pushing this data outwards and backwards. And you can do a semblance of graphical user interface testing to do that. However, with HP UFT, which, by the way, is an evolution from Quick Test Professional all the way to UFT. Quick Test Professional is the predecessor to UFT, and QTP and service tests sort of came together, right? So HP took the two products, kind of melded them together into one, and re-released this product, so to speak, back into the wild called HP UFT. So UFT now gives you the capabilities to actually go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to lift the hood and I'm going to test some of these web services and APIs, and I'm going to automate the testing of these web services and APIs. So you're no longer dependent on your graphical user interface automated test cases. You're no longer dependent on your subject matter experts to do data validation testing, during user acceptance testing to point or to look at certain data elements to ensure that perhaps the calculations or what have you, the algorithm on a certain data value came out correctly, facing you in the graphical user interface. Now you can actually use an automation tool to build out your automation scripts and confirm everything prior to getting to that level. So, who does it? Who does this sort of test automation? So one of the things, today this is Series 2 of our QA technology talks, and we're going to speak about HP UFT. However, in future talks and future series, we're going to focus a little bit of our attention around Lean FT as well. So HP UFT, it can be used by both the non-technical individual within your organization, such as your subject matter experts or perhaps your process champion experts, your business analysts, your quality assurance team. But it also can be used by more technical folks within your organization, such as Joey. Joey has very deep technical knowledge, and he'll be giving a demonstration today. Your test automation engineers, your developers, your quality assurance team. It could be used by a variety of different folks. Lean FT, however, is going to be a bit more technical, and we'll talk about that in future series. But today we're going to focus our attention on HP UFT. Now, I mentioned something in the previous slide around shifting left. We've all heard the terminology. If you've been around the QA space, we all hear about shifting left, right? But we've only been hearing about it for the past few years. If you remember back in 2011, Google had that tech talks about test is dead. And one of the things they mentioned, it really opened the eyes of QA practitioners, and it really helped us to redefine the value proposition that we bring to organizations and why it is so critical that organizations have the right tools in place in order to shift left. We can talk about shifting left until we're blue in the face, but unless we have the right tools in place to facilitate that shifting left, we'll just simply never get there. And what HP has realized that, and they've architected solutions in such a way, including UFT and the the seamless integration of UFT with your existing assets, such as Application Lifecycle Management, Quality Center, Performance Center, HP Mobile Center. All of these products are designed to work in concert with one another. And basically what we're going to be looking at today is right here, the API front/service testing portion of this delivery lifecycle. So you want to be able to trap those bugs way further up into the delivery lifecycle. So before you even hand the system over to your subject matter experts or your business for user acceptance testing, you don't want to embarrass yourself by having critical interfaces not working appropriately. What HP UFT does is it really gives you that opportunity to design these interface tests and these API tests around the critical functions. You know, your inbound purchase orders, your outbound invoices, your planning schedules, your vendor managed inventory, your advanced ship notifications that might be going out to your retail community, or even, you know, your web-based orders that are coming through. Or how about tax determination as an example? A lot of companies use third-party tax determination providers to determine tax on different products that you're selling. Well, you know, if you're an international or a multinational organization that operates across, you know, all these different continents and countries, there's different tax codes in all these different countries. So it's imperative that you have the right API testing strategy in place before you provide this product over to your business to do user acceptance testing, or even before you even get the system integration testing. You know, you want to have a checks and measures in place beforehand, and having the ability to automate it beforehand is crucial. You save yourself a lot of time and a lot of headaches. Okay? So with that being said, you know, I'd like to provide a little intro here, and then I turn it over to our expert to kind of give us a live demo of the product. I might ask a few questions along the way, but the demo takes maybe 15 minutes or so, perhaps give or take 5 or 10 minutes. I'm going to ask a few questions along the way. We'll close the call out. And then, of course, if you have any questions about what we've presented today, or if you'd like perhaps for us to work with you in a one-on-one manner to build out a proof of concept, you can always reach out to us at info@resultspositive.com, or you can point your browser to our website at www.resultspositive.com. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hand this over to Joey, and then Joey should be able to walk us through what we want to see today.
What I'll do is I'll go ahead and start once again with UFT. So we're going to start UFT. You know, typically for most presentations, I would have this open, already launched. You know, this might be new for some people on the phone. It might be old news, but this is UFT version 12.5. So this is the latest and greatest version. You can see definitely some color scheme changes. To Matt's point, we'll talk about some of the functionality that was introduced with both this version and some of the previous versions of the product. You can see there's the first thing that you get when you launch Unified Functional Testing is the add-in manager. It's probably one of the broadest supports. We're going to leave this basic right now because today and for this series number 2, we're going to be looking at API testing, which is a little different. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the product set. And why I mention this a little bit different is we, from the HP standpoint, there was the initiative to combine QTP and what was historically known as service test into the same product set. So that is what UFT was created from. So you still have the capabilities if you were a legacy QTP user to do all the functionality for testing, functional testing of graphical interfaces, but also with the new addition to what was service test as API test now into the product set, we have the ability to execute at the API level. So why is that important? Why it's important to test at the API level is, for the most part, most of our application business logic is going to be exposed and accessible early on in the development lifecycle. So we don't have to wait for interfaces to change to test that business logic. We can actually start with API level functional test execution. So we'll get a look at that a little bit more when we get into our demo application. But first thing I'll show you right off the bat is this is the basic interface of once you start UFT. So one thing I want to point out is you can see the start page. Now, the start page can be rendered, and I'll make a little bit of screen real estate so we can look at that. The start page can be turned off, but it's always a great starting point for users that are new to not just UFT or legacy QTP, but any of the HP product releases. Because it will link you directly to some of the new enhancements, some of the new functionality, and it also gives you accessible links to the things that you might need to use on a daily basis, right? Our forums, our support, product movies, you name it. So, I like to point that out because you'll see that in most HP product sets. Easy interface to get started, and that's one thing that we're going to look at, especially with API testing. Matt kind of talked about the difference between functional testing products a little bit early on, LeanFT, and then what is now Unified Functional Testing, or UFT. You can see that this is built in a development environment, but the product core functionality is meant to be very easy to learn and use. So built on an integrated development environment, but you'll see through the demo that the functionality is very easy to pick up on. So with that being said, we're going to start our first test. So I'm going to go up to File, New, and we're just going to create a new test. So what you'll see is we'll have a couple of options for tests, where we have GUI test, and I'm going to highlight that. This is what you can think of as the legacy QTP functionality, right? So where we use Quick Test Professional to test everything that we could interface with a graphical interface, whether that was a client application, whether that was a web application. That is what has been combined down from QTP's original functionality. So you can refer to those as GUI tests now. And then the introduction to service test gives us API load test and API test. One of the other things that we were able to do is combine those two service test functionality into both a functional automated test and something that could be shared with Performance Center and Load Runner, which is the load-enabled API test. We're going to focus on the functionality, right, today. So we're going to go in and create an API test. So I'm just going to go ahead and create. We're going to call this AOB. So the sample application we're doing today is Advantage Online Banking. So it's a sample banking application. But I'm going to go ahead and create a script. And then we're going to talk about that. So the script's going to create, and you'll see that we're going to get the Solution Explorer populated. And so we'll point that as soon as the script gets rendered. So here's the rendering of our new script. So you can see the Solution Explorers, the files, the events, any kind of custom code. Of course, this is a blank test, right? We're creating from scratch, so not much presented in our Solution Explorer currently. And then we get dropped down to our script action flow. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But first, we're going to switch over, and we're going to look at the sample application real quick. So very briefly, let's just go and come over to our demo application. So it's running as an in-tier application, right? It's a sample application, but this is the application running in the background. And I'm going to just open a browser window, and I'm going to take you quickly through what this sample application is. So we'll look at the demo applications, and we're going to go into Advantage Online Banking. So very kind of simplistic application. We're going to log in as my test user. And so very, very similar to any other banking application that a real user may be going through, right? We want to come in, we want to look at our accounts, we want to look at our account summaries. So those are very easy transactions, right? But there's a lot of interaction here as far as dealing with the client, right? We see a green screen, we see Advantage Online Banking, certain fonts. But companies adjust. They change their marketing materials. They change their logos, maybe even color schemes that get bought out. So the importance there is that the clients are constantly changing. But typical functionality from a business standpoint and business logic standpoint, it doesn't really change that often. So it's easier for QA to get an early start and test the business logic at the API level, right? We can start to generate some of our key components in script format and interact with the APIs directly without having to worry around what the graphical interface necessarily is doing. Yes, moving down the development cycle, we are going to be concerned with how that interface renders and testing that interface and testing that interfaces on mobile devices. And yeah, we're of course going to do that testing at a later stage, but it by no means keeps us from testing that business logic early on with UFT API testing. So you can see I've logged in with my test user. This is Test John, and we have a couple of accounts listed. So we have a couple of savings accounts, we have checking accounts, account numbers, and different balances. So what I'm going to do real quick is we're going to switch back over. So, that's kind of the application we're going to be testing against, but you won't see this necessary interface anywhere in UFT. So I'm going to minimize this. We'll switch back to our UFT environment. Now we're going to talk about UFT in the toolbox. So the toolbox becomes very important with API testing. It's probably where we're going to do the majority of our work. So I'm going to switch over to the toolbox, and the first thing you're going to notice is there's a lot of standard activities. So the standard activities are things that are built into UFT natively. So out of the box, we've broken up and grouped kind of the functionality together in different major modules. So when we think about interacting with different APIs or different types of APIs, JMS, for instance, being able to push and pull from a queue, that's kind of how this is broken up from a toolbox perspective. For this exercise, this application is going to be driven SOAP, but of course there's a lot of different technologies and a lot of different messaging layers that we support. So we're just going to be looking at SOAP today, but REST APIs, you have the ability to check in definition files with REST also, and a lot of legacy technologies are going to be included out of the box. So just to give you an idea of what the toolbox looks like. The other thing that we want to do is have some control over our local activities. And local activities in this correspondence is going to really correspond to the script itself. So the local activities are what this script knows about. So what we want to do is be able to open up and share some of these other messages, right, SOAP or REST, and we do that through the definition file usually. So you have the flexibility to come in and import definition file. So because we're SOAP, I'm going to open a WSDL file. So I'm going to import. So Advantage Online Banking has the ability to expose our WSDLs. They're not always exposed by default, but we can import from a file. We can also store those definitions in ALM, the ALM repository, and pull them from the repository directly. So you have a couple of different options here. We're going to definitely do it by the URL. So URL, and I'm just going to cut and paste. Let me open it up. I have my WSDLs listed. So I'll grab my WSDL real quick. Oops. And we'll do account services. So that's a straightforward one. So I'll grab my definition file. You can see in XML, there's the WSDL listed for you. So all the details around the operations that correspond with this web service or this SOAP service are listed there. So we could go through that. I'll just scroll real quickly. Standard WSDL file, nothing special. But we do have the definition. So I'm going to minimize that, and we're going to go ahead and just paste that in. And I'll hit OK. And it's going to import that. Now you can see my local activities for this test case have been filled in. So we have the account service, and then underneath that we have our service port and the operation. So these are some of the operations that are supported by this SOAP. The other thing that we can look at is some of the details. So, apologize. We'll open up our properties window. We'll go ahead and talk around that. So from the property standpoint, we can understand exactly what this account service is set to do. So we have a name for it. We have the location and the working folder. Of course, we imported this. It's going to be unique to the script. It'll get saved along with the script definition so that we can, in the future understand the services. And then we have the import location. So once again, business logic can change. It doesn't change as often necessarily as maybe an interface would. But at the same time, we know where we're importing this definition. We can go out, we can scan for changes, we can ask for the latest definition file. So that's the flexibility that we have kind of with the web service and managing the properties internal to the script. Now, functionality. So let's think about, the business logic here. We have a lot of different operations. For this, I'm going to go ahead and just do create account, right? We're going to start for the basics. I'm a new customer to the bank potentially, or I just want to open a new account with my existing bank. So that's one of the business logics that we're going to kind of define with this operation, create account. So I'm going to drag that over. Let me highlight it. So you can see that the functionality is very much as far as assembling. We're not working with code. We're not at the code level. We're really just working with the operations directly, and we're going to be able to drag and drop some of these operations around. And of course, I can bring up a property window again, and this is going to show me very detailed properties just for this operation. So I can see that this is the service call. The type is the create account. And I can even see the transport mechanism, right? So we'll have various transport mechanisms. This is HTTP, SOAP call. I can see the endpoint, right? So if I needed to change the endpoint or maybe focus this to another swim lane or another testing channel, I have the ability to modify it directly with the account. I can also do things like parameterize that endpoint. So if I wanted to drive this test against several different environments or several different swim lanes, I have that capability. So I can do multiple iterations. It's basic content type, just text, XML that we're going to be passing over. And we're not really putting a SOAP action in the header here. So it's kind of a very basic test application. But you have that capability, right? If you're passing SOAP actions and you need that as one of your input parameters, you have all the functionality here to be able to configure what this operation does. The same is true with security mechanisms, right? So if we want to do different security settings, edit the settings for authentication for a SOAP call, to be able to interact with what's required to be able to access and authorize a web service call, you have all that capability. But this is pretty much a sample application, so we don't really lock down the security. But for more secure applications, that functionality is there, so it's available, right? So we support, the most released security measures and protocols as we update the product. The real key that we want to focus on is creating the account. So we'll come back over and we'll look at the actual properties themselves. You have different ways to look at the actual SOAP request and response. So we're going to look at the first half to start with, and this is the request. So you have the ability by default to see it in grid mode. So we're looking at it in kind of our tree view, what we call the grid. We can look at the raw text, and we can even do things like upload. So if we have sample payloads, maybe us as QA have went to our development team and said, hey, we're creating these SOAP tests, web service tests, API tests, et cetera, but it would be nice to have some example payloads that may have been captured to use or import right into our tool set. That's not always the case. The definition is going to show us what is required. So you can see that as we assemble a header and a body, we have some account parameters that are being passed in. So for the start of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide some data. So this is unique to the application. Account types are numeric for this application. So I'm just going to say 1, then I'm going to give it a customer number. Now, John Test is my first customer, so that's 1. I mean, this would link back to the application, so you would want some information around what possibly we're passing in. There's a lot of different types that we support, so if it was a drop-down, you have that capability, but we're going to go with what I know, my knowledge of the application. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a new account, and I'm going to tie that to John. So we'll go ahead and we'll save this. I can hit save here. I'm going to hit play just to show you what happens. So when we execute this for the first time, it's going to compile our script. So basically, we're going to go through a compile. So it's going to save for me, and I'm going to hit run. One thing that will happen here is this screen will change, and it's going to bring us up the output window. So not like Quick Test Professional, where we can actually see a walkthrough of the application. There's no graphical interface that we're dealing with, so the playback is going to be definitely different. So what we're going to be doing is compiling our script with what we've asked it to do. We're going to see the compile, and then in the output window, we're going to see the request structure and the request sent over, and then essentially a response. And you can see that we have some response. We don't have to look at the output window. You're going to get what we call the result set back. So the result set has been revamped a little bit. Is HTML-based now. So it's not in a legacy or proprietary file extension like it used to be. It's very easy to share result sets from the new version of UFT 12.5 because it is HTML-driven. I'm going to give a little bit of real estate so we can look at this result set. You can see it went through the test flow, right? Very basic test flow. Here's my action blocks. The iteration, right? We only have one row that we're really executing against. We haven't enabled data driving or anything like that. So we're only running one iteration. This could show several different iterations. And basic operation, right? Create account. So we'll look at the create account. We have a checkpoint. By default, you'll get the structural integrity checkpoint. So structural integrity kind of checked out. It validated for us that, that was a correct request to make. There was no issues with that. And we got a response back. We can kind of look at our create account service call, and I'll just kind of scroll down. You can see we captured the properties. So the web service call properties, our response codes, everything that we would want to care about as far as how we executed the service is being picked up for us. So even the HTTP status code 200. So we know that the actual service call at least made it to its destination, and we returned a response that was valid. And then we even get the request and response payload, the headers, and the actual SOAP message. So you can see I created a SOAP request to create an account. There's my properties that I passed over, 1 and 1, and we can even look at the body, the response. So we returned in this situation, a valid create account request, which is 543985. That happens for this application to be the newly created account number. So 85 is or .85 is our new account number. So this just kind of passed. It created a new account for us. So I'm going to minimize this for a second, and we're going to come back over to the demo environment, and I'll just try to hopefully render. I'll log back in. And so there's our 85. There's our new account. So we have a new savings account. That was what the account type was, 1, right? So we create a new savings account. There's our account number that was returned from our service call, and we had a 0 balance. So that's kind of what we accomplished with creating one operation, a simple operation to create a new account, right? And so we're validating that from the interface here. Now, we could execute that business logic, that test. We have all the information that we would need to say, okay, that was valid. And depending on how we're going to change this interface around, we should still see the data wherever we put it, wherever we design the interface to put the information. So that's one way to validate. Also, just on the whole scheme that maybe we don't even have an interface created, I'm going to bring over our database, and we're going to look at our account services right from our database. So this is a SQL Server-driven backend. This is our data repository for the Advantage Online Banking sample application. So I could come in and I can just, I'll select the top rows. It's not a lot of data here. It's going to run a query for me. It's going to bring back all the accounts, and I can also see there's our account number and our account type, and we have a 0 balance put into the application. So very simple exercise. Now what we're going to look at is, stringing these together, right? So we're going to talk about taking the business logic or the individual operations and tying it together like an application would. So I'm going to switch screens for you one more time. And we're going to look over at our client demo environment. I'm going to close the results set down. We're going to bring back up our test flow, our script itself. So there's properties with the test flow. I'll talk about those real briefly. So once again, this may be something that we want to repeat. We may want to data drive this. We have the option to do that. So for our test flow, you can see it's kind of the parent object here for our create account operation. So we could do that once. We could do it for a condition. We could set a condition, or we can drive it for data, right, for each data element. And we can tie this back to some data. So we'll come back to that. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make our single operation, very simple exercise here. I'm going to make it a little more complex, because now what I want to do is I want to create an account, right, a brand new account, but I don't want it to have a zero balance. Now, I don't have the ability with the create account operation to specify a balance, because we're working on the API level. I mean, these operations do what they need to do in very minute elements. And so create account is there to create an account. But in this situation, my business logic, I want to create an account, and I want to have automatically $1,000 essentially put in that account. So now I have, you can see for my operations, a set balance operation. So once again, I'm going to click, I'm going to drag that over, and I'm going to say I'm going to set a balance. So now we're going to set a balance. You can see that I have a different operation. I have different properties for my operation. For set balance, it requires two inputs, an account number and an account balance. So for the account number, I don't want to data drive this, right? So it's not like I have what those elements are going to be, right, what the account number is going to be, because it's going to be generated for me in this case. So what I want to do is I want to tie that to an output parameter for my create account. So what I do here is, instead of just entering raw information, I'm going to click my little link to data source, and I'll have a couple of options here. I can create a data source. So if I wanted to create a brand new data source or input a data source, if I wanted to use test variables. So test variables kind of link to variables that are unique to this machine, OS, certain generators, product versions. I could link to those, but what I want to do is I want to link to an existing step. So I want to say, we saw create account. The create account kind of is going to generate us this return value, right? So the return value we saw with looking at the actual response payload, that it was my account number. So in this situation, I want to link that return number to my input parameter for my account number. So you can see I've established the linkage. It's showing in my test flow. One of my parameters being an output, and then becoming an input parameter to my second call, which is set balance. So that's how we would establish linkages and create more complex business logic. And then once again, as part of my business case, I want to create a flow or a balance that is $1,000. So I'll just go ahead and put that value in. Leaving weird characters for you. So now we have our two input parameters. We're creating an account, and we're setting a balance. So I'm going to go ahead and save this again. This will be our new script. And we're going to go ahead and play this back. So we'll hit run. We'll wait here for a couple of seconds for our window to pop up. Here's our output window. It's going to run through our business flow. We're creating an account, and we're also setting a balance. So from our results standpoint, as soon as this script finishes executing, we have our results, we have pass. You can see we have our create account. We also have the set balance. So we're doing definitely checkpoint validations on both of those for structural integrity. But we executed both of these operations. We can look at set balance. I'll get a little more screen real estate. We'll look at the payload for setting a balance. passes and fail. We're not really got a return value for a balance at all. So, for the most part, we did exactly what we wanted to do. We have execution, right? We have valid execution. And then just for demonstration purposes, I'll switch back over, and we'll look at our new account summary in the application under test. I'll refresh this. And so we have our 86 account. That was the next one that was created for us, and we have a balance of 1,000. So that's how we're kind of interacting with, the APIs for this, simple application, Advantage Online Banking. We're taking ourselves really away from the application interface and the layout, and we're being able to test the actual core business logic at the API level with HP UFT, or Unified Functional Testing.
Hey, well, thank you for walking through that. I think that was a perfect example. It wasn't too little, but it wasn't too much, and I think it gives the folks who are listening to this understanding of how HP UFT you can utilize what is available within this new tool set to go ahead and start developing some of those API tests. And as Joey pointed out before, if you think of the different layers of testing, one of the things that he mentioned is, software is ever evolving, whether it's a buyout or it's merging with another company. Your web-based application is constantly changing. I just recently logged into my savings account, which used to be ING Direct, and now it was purchased by Capital One 360. The entire look, feel, everything changed. And I hadn't logged into my account forever. I had it on auto draft to save over the years, and I just figured I'd log in, just randomly. And I was amazed at how quickly it changed. But I guess one of the things that doesn't change as much is some of the interfaces. And the reason that companies don't like to often modify some of the interfaces, especially with some more of the key transactions, I'm not saying they don't, and you are going to have to make modifications, of course, to your API tests, but the frequency level is a lot lower than some of the other tests. But the reason they don't want to make those modifications is because if anybody on the call has been on some of these larger scale implementations, we know that interfaces and security seem to be the hot spot for defects. I mean, it's constantly, defects are continuously being found in these areas. They're high-risk areas. So that's why it's important to develop your API testing strategy in concert with HP UFT, but to also encourage your team to make the right design decisions up front. So as you're moving forward and you're rolling vendors onto your solution or you're building interfaces to other products, you want to make sure that your design decisions are solid and you're not making these decisions in a vacuum. You want to include everybody at the table, because the last thing you want to be able to, when you're building these automated tests over your different APIs, you want to make sure that your team doesn't have to continually go back and make updates all the time. But anyhow, that's just a little bit of advice, I guess, that I had from some of the projects that I've managed in the past. I just noticed the hotbed of defect activity has been around interfaces and security. But anyhow, thank you everybody for taking the time to listen to this Tech Talk today. You can always join us for future Tech Talks, and point your browser to www.resultspositive.com. We have a section out there on the blog that's devoted specifically to our QA technology talks. I'll be joining Joey again here, I'm sure, in the near future to go ahead and record another technology talk, probably across a different topic. Here at Results Positive, we like to lead with education and help our clients to understand the value that can be had from some of the tools that you might already own, but you may not be fully realize the powerful features that are inherently capable within these tool sets. So with that, I thank you, Joey, for joining me today, and I'm going to go ahead and close the call out. Thanks, everybody else, for taking the time to watch.